Now the question is going to be who wins the technology war, because the winner of the technology war is going to win all wars. In other words, they'll win the economic war. They'll win the geopolitical war because technology. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't repeated through history. People always think that the future would be a slightly modified version of the present. And it's not. Okay, watch over decades. But it's like watching a person grow. You watch your kid or you watch a person and your age, any age,
My parents.
and that's what you see.
Yeah.
Okay? And you don't see the life arc.
Yeah.
Okay, but the life arc is irrefutable.
But do you think it's conceivable that in the next 50 to 100 years, the US could no longer be the dominant power globally?
Yeah. Yeah, more than conceivable.
The world we live in today is not the same world we knew a decade ago. The global system is shifting, and the cracks are now too visible to ignore. For years, America and the United Kingdom stood tall as symbols of wealth, order, and stability. They built an image of strength that influenced almost every corner of the earth. But what happens when the pillars themselves begin to weaken? What happens when the very foundations that held the system together start breaking apart? That is what we are facing right now, a moment where history's old patterns are repeating themselves before our eyes. And no, this is not just a slowdown in the economy. It is not just another turn in the cycle. It is the making of something much deeper and far more dangerous. Governments are drowning in debt they can never truly repay. People are losing faith in leaders and institutions that once commanded respect. Rival powers are rising, confident enough to challenge the order that America and Britain once controlled without question. The signals are just too clear for anyone willing to see. Now, Ray Dalio, the billionaire investor and founder of Bridgewater Associates, calls this moment the entry into very, very dark times. His warning is not built on random guesses. As someone who has studied 5 centuries of global history, what he says he sees is chilling. He points to the same markers that have shown up again and again whenever great powers began their decline. According to him, both the United States and the United Kingdom are on that same path today. The debt, the divisions, the conflicts, the technology race, and the growing external pressures are converging all at once. And when all these forces meet together, history shows the outcome is rarely peaceful. Let's bring you more clips from Ray Dalio's latest insightful interview. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for more in-depth content. Thanks for joining us again. Enjoy the rest of the video.
The UK has a financial problem. The government has a debt problem. And it doesn't have enough money for what it wants to do and what it can do. And so what you see is the non-dom problem, people moving, and so on and so forth. And throughout history, when you have these sorts of things, then there's great clashes in people, okay? And the UK has been in decline since the war. Even the development of the capital markets, can you raise capital there? All of these things are much worse than they are in the United States.
And it leads to clashes, you said.
Of course, there are 5 big forces that create a big cycle that lasts about 80 years, give or take 50, let's say. And the 5 big forces are, there's a money, debt, economy force, okay? Debt's their spending power. So what happens is when you give somebody credit, they can spend. But it also produces debt. And debt has to be paid back. And so what happens is if there's not enough income to pay back the debt, then you have debt rising relative to income. It squeezes out spending. People don't want to hold the debt assets, and so on. The UK is going through that and has gone through that, and it's connected to the second force. And we're all going through this in varying degrees. The second force is the internal political and social force. In other words, like between the left and the right, with wealth gaps and opportunities gaps. We have big wealth and opportunities gaps. So when you have big wealth and opportunities gaps, there's conflict. Conflict between the left and the right. And when you get to the situation where you don't believe the system is working for you and you don't trust the system, then there are wars. There are internal conflicts over that and so on. So the third force is the geopolitical force. In other words, there's a cycle that usually goes from one big war to another big war. So the last war ended in 1944, and we began a new order in 1945. And the way that works is that the winners of the war determine how the world order works. They draw borders, they say, here's how it's going to work, and that's the new order. Okay. And that continues until there's a rising power challenging an existing power in the existing world order, which typically is deteriorating at that time. And then you have international conflict, okay? These orders, there's a monetary order, they all break down. There's an internal political order, they all break down. And there's a geopolitical order, they all have this conflict, and they work together. The fourth force throughout history has been acts of nature. Droughts, floods, and pandemics, for example, have killed more people than wars. And acts of nature. Nature has a big effect. And then number 5 force is man's inventiveness, particularly of new technologies. Okay, because if you see that inventiveness, that has raised per capita incomes, GDP per capita, any measures of the living standards over a period of time, and so on. But it is also related to the first 4 that I said. Those four forces interact. Now, when we go back to your UK case, okay, they have a financial problem. They and almost every country now is dealing with more of that internal political problem. For the same reasons, wealth gaps, opportunities gaps, what do we do? Who's got the power? I don't trust the system kind of thing. Okay, number 3 is we are certainly in an international great powers conflict, right? And it certainly affects Europe and the UK as we're dealing with not only the Ukraine situation, but the Russian situation. And what does that mean? And that relates to the money thing because, okay, where's the money coming from to have defense or military expenditures and so on and so forth? So that matters, right? The geopolitical matters. Climate certainly matters. And then, of course, technology and inventiveness. So everything could be looked at through that lens.
And so what does this mean for the UK if all other countries are going through this as well? Doesn't that just mean that all countries are going to suffer equally?
No, because they're not all equal. Okay, some are more in debt than others. Okay, some people are more willing to hold their debt than others. Some means they have more resources. Some are bigger and more powerful. Some are less powerful. They're different. Okay, they're all in different conditions. Some countries have surpluses. Some countries, are not in the middle of where there's having a war.
Are you optimistic about the future of the UK at the moment?
No.
Because it has high debt, it has the social internal conflict, it's affected by the geopolitical factors, and in terms of inventiveness, it doesn't have the culture that other countries have, like the US. Is that?
Yes, the culture and the capital markets to support that at a scale that it needs to be supported to play seriously in the game.
And for anyone that doesn't know, capital markets mean basically the investor markets, is a way of saying.
Well, I mean, it gets you the money. In other words, you're a guy behind, what happens is we have to enable people. Okay. What works is finding great people, talented people, and identifying those who you want to bet on and enabling them. And that works. That's the most important force, much more important than money. Okay, because you could see who's got the money and power and where did they come from? Where did NVIDIA come from? Where did they all come from? Okay, they're guys like you, entrepreneur in a sense, who's been enabled, okay, because you have the talent and people want to bet on you, and that's the capital markets. So they give you money to help enable you because they want to bet on you, and then good things happen.
But are you optimistic about the United States at the moment?
The United States is very much a big picture. No, I think it's very much in this issue. So if I go down my list, it definitely has this debt money economy problem. We can get into that. Okay. It definitely has the internal conflict power in which there's a fight. between the left, the hard left and the right, due to wealth and values gaps and people not believing that the system will work for them. And so democracy is at risk because they don't believe this. They're not going to follow the rules, in the sense they don't believe the rules are going to. Number three, it's of course the leading one side in this great power conflict of the world between the United States and the one side, let's say, and China and the allies, their allies on the other side.
Dalio builds his case with 5 major forces that, when combined, bring nations to their knees. The first is the money and debt crisis. Both the US and the UK are weighed down with debt levels that no healthy system can manage. This kind of pressure eventually breaks economies from the inside. The second force is internal conflict. Inequality has left huge gaps between the rich and the poor, and that fuels anger, distrust, and political division. The third force is the rise of external rivals, most clearly seen in the growing clash between America and China for global leadership. The fourth is the shock of acts of nature, from pandemics that shut economies down to climate events that drain national strength. And the fifth is technology, the weapon that will decide who wins the future, with artificial intelligence sitting at the very center of the fight. Dalio warns that these forces are not just theory, they are active and visible right now. He pointed out Britain's significant debt problem, its shrinking culture of innovation, and its growing capital outflow to other countries. America, despite its strong innovation spirit, is at risk because of its own internal battles and its shaky financial balance. In his view, these paths could mean the US losing its global power within a century. Let's watch more clips from the interview.
Now the question is going to be who wins the technology war, because the winner of the technology war is going to win all wars, okay? In other words, they'll win the economic war. They'll win the geopolitical war because technology. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't repeated through history. The technology, for example, nuclear.
Yeah.
Nuclear won World War II. In order to understand these things, because I have to bet on what's going to happen, I'm a global macro investor. I studied the last 500 years of history, and it happens over and over again in all cases. So I could take the British Empire, I could take you through all the empires, the Dutch Empire before that, and all this, and it happens all the time. If you look at the probabilities and the paths and the symptoms, there is a challenge. The United States is facing a number of those challenges. And we're at a moment where it's a question of whether the system and the people can get control of the situations and deal with it strongly and well in a way where they are not fighting to the point of damaging each other and damaging the prospects for the future.
But I mean, the United States is very innovative. Got all these great innovative companies here, so surely...
Yeah, but you can't make generalizations about the United States, and you can't make generalizations, by the way, about the markets either. What you see is 1%, a small percentage, 1% of the population. If you're looking at the breakdown of incomes and also you're looking at the innovation, the stock markets, which stocks are doing well, who owns those companies, and all of that, about 3 million people in a country of 330 million people are really unbelievably doing great. And you could pick the neighborhoods they're in and what they're doing. And then there's the top 10%, let's say, which is the people around them, and they're really, really doing great in that world. At the same time, the bottom 60% of Americans have below a 6th grade reading level. And that population, in terms of the basics, being productive, you have to be productive and be prosperous. So what you need to have a successful society is to have broad-based productivity and prosperity. Okay, and that's a problem. Okay, so which America are you looking at? And are you watching the war that's happening between these?
If you think it's fixable, and if you were in charge of the UK, what you might aim at first, it's different,
First of all, if you go back to the basic problem, which is there's too much debt, there are deficits, there's differences in education and opportunity levels, and so on. The most important thing that you can have is a strong middle, to be analytically strong and also strong enough to get the people to do what needs to be done, even if they don't want to do it, to get to be productive. Now, that's an easy thing to say. It's not an easy thing to do, but you do need that strong middle, and you do need to convey to people that you need to have this strong middle to change productivity. And, and are you in it? Are you in it? Are you patriotic and in it? And, but you look at history, how did the United States come to be the United States? People will go to the places that are better than them than stay in the places that are worse for them. This is fundamental, right?
Incentives.
Okay. Yeah. So you have to make the place better. Okay. Now, I would say also you can take pockets and they go into the pocket and let it spread out. But you also have to have this equal education, or, you've got to strive for equal opportunity. But anyway, it's a difficult question that I'm afraid I'm incapable of solving. I'm a practical guy. I'm a realistic guy. I made my money. I'm in the business, and it's my nature to try to be realistic and to bet on how things will transpire. And that's not healthy. The situation in the UK is not healthy. And the situation in the United States is very risky in many ways. There's a saying in Hong Kong, a Chinese saying, which is a smart rabbit has 3 holes. And what that means is you can see, is it the UK or the US? And I can then move to the better place and get out of the place that's a terrible place. So can I successfully be an immigrant or whatever and change my location? Throughout history, that's been important. So the ability to go to good places and away from bad places. So that's part of it. Secondly, building your financial strength is important, which has to do with how you earn, spend, and save. That will determine the amount. And then what you do with that amount is invest. And so how you invest is also important. If you have your financial ability and you can make the move, and then you have knowledge, about what's happening so that you can change things, those are the things you need.
The debt crisis stands as the first and most dangerous problem. America and Britain both owe more than they can ever comfortably manage. When a system leans too heavily on borrowing, collapse becomes a real risk. This is tightly connected to the second force, social division. Inequality has divided societies into 2 worlds, all living within the same borders. People no longer see each other as one people, but as enemies fighting for survival. This is why Ray Dalio fears democracy itself could break down. He compares this moment to the 1930s, when many democracies collapsed under similar stress and turned to authoritarian rulers. The global stage only makes this worse. China and Russia are strengthening their ties, creating a counterbalance to Western power. The Cold War of the past has taken on a new shape, and this one is fought not only with weapons, but also with technology and financial resources. Artificial intelligence has become the real battlefield. The side that controls AI will hold both economic and military advantage, making it the most powerful weapon of this century. For ordinary people, Ray Dalio's advice is striking. He says survival requires flexibility. Do not anchor your life and wealth in one declining system. He recalls a Chinese proverb about the smart rabbit with 3 holes, which means people must be prepared with different safe options for both their money and their families. He warns individuals to practice financial discipline, save carefully, and avoid blind spending. However, he also notes that protection is not only about money, it is about knowledge and community. He encourages people to understand the big cycles so they can make more informed decisions in their careers and investments. Old assumptions may no longer work in a world that is changing so fast. He emphasizes the importance of meaningful work and strong relationships, as it is community support that helps people endure in times of chaos. The most alarming message he gives is about politics. As pressures grow, democracies will be tested like never before. The temptation of authoritarian power will rise, and history shows that societies in pain often choose that path. Ray Dalio believes the West is moving closer to that danger point. His final words are not hopeful promises but sobering truths. He says progress often comes only through pain and reflection. The dark times are unavoidable, but awareness and preparation can help people survive them. The age of Western dominance is drawing to an end, and in its place, a new and uncertain order is taking shape in the shadows of today's chaos. The big question is, if the signs of decline are this clear, will America and Britain adapt in time to avoid collapse, or are we already watching the fall of two great empires in real time? Let us know your view about this in the comment box. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.